It's not surprising that the White Rock Playhouse in White Rock, British Columbia is a very haunted place. As a class of buildings, theaters are very, very haunted. We know that actors spend a lot of time concentrating. They learn their lines, but they focus on being somebody else on stage for such a concentrated period of time. A number of people believe that their energy stays behind, even long after the play has ended, long after the actors have died.
They were rehearsing a scene last year, a play called An Intimate Affair. It was just the two of them in the building rehearsing, and they heard footsteps above them. The leading lady looked up. She swears that she saw some kind of a male figure up in the rafters. And there's no way that you can get up there without a ladder being on the stage.
Franklin Johnson is well known in White Rock, British Columbia, as a person who was very involved in the local theater. The White Rock Playhouse was his creation. He acted, he directed, he even helped finance the construction of the building. Franklin mortgaged his house and put his heart and soul into the place. But there's very much a reason why he's come back.
Well, after he passed away and his ashes were given to the theater, they were actually used in an urn on stage in several productions. I think for a few years they managed to leave him on stage. And then Mark Burrell, I believe it was, decided that the best way that he would be in the theater would be to spread his ashes underneath the stage in the dirt. And so he's still down here.
My daughter and I were doing a pantomime maybe about 4 years ago. I was directing the show and my daughter was up in the dressing room with the wardrobe lady. They were the only two in the room. My daughter was sitting at a dressing room table and the wardrobe lady, Sandy, Sandy looked between the mirrors and looked at my daughter, and there was tears rolling down my daughter's face. So she got up, walked around the makeup table and said, "What's the matter, Elena?" And my daughter turned to her and said, "It's the man in the mirror." There was no one else in the dressing room at the time. My daughter doesn't really remember the incident, but I'm sure Sandy remembers the incident, and I know all of us who were around her during that remember it. It was a rather creepy moment in the dressing room.
I've been with the theater for 2-3 years now, doing tech work, lighting and sound and such. We're rehearsing for this play, and an actress had to go upstairs to get her bottle of water. And she was going up the stairs, and halfway up the stairs, and her figure was coming back down. She hugged the wall as best she could, and as the figure went by, she had this just sheer freezing cold feeling rush through her body, and as if like a wind had passed by her. Had this really, really, really scared look in her face.
We constantly hear stories about people being alone in the building and hearing footsteps upstairs. After checking it, there's absolutely nobody in the building, and it's very distinctive footsteps. And it's, you know, somebody wearing a hard-soled shoe. And it's actually quite eerie at times.
The creepiest situation happened to me one weekend when I was cleaning up all by myself, when I heard a gentleman walk onto the stage. I asked him if he needed any help. He didn't reply, and I asked him if he was looking for someone, and still no answer. And then he walked right past me and went out into the lobby. I followed, and a couple seconds later, I was out in the lobby looking around, and there was no one there. Couldn't find anybody, and the doors were all locked up.
When the actors are on stage and then the play's going on, the actors will actually, look in the wings and stop for a second as if they've seen something. It's easy to tell when an actor all of a sudden is off his mark a bit. They tell me afterwards that they looked in the side of the wings and they notice a figure there. No matter how long they look at the figure, they just can't picture who it is. They look away, look back, and then it's gone again. We're doing tech work for a production. This is just before opening night, so I'd come early. I got into the booth, ran through the lighting sequences, brought the lights down for one scene, and when I brought them up, it seemed as if there was someone on stage just for a second, as if I'd caught them and they were caught by surprise. Just like that, they were gone. I thought I was seeing things, but the guy who was running sound beside me just looked up and said, "Did you see that?" Yeah. Needless to say, we had an interesting story to tell the crew.
There has been a couple of sightings. I have personally never sighted a ghost myself. I have seen things go missing within a period of 2 minutes from when I've set them down. They've been missing, not turned up till 2-3 days later. Jewelry goes missing quite often. That's about the normal thing that goes on. I was going backstage one night and there was a wheelchair that was blocking the fire door, and it's a bit of a fire hazard and I didn't want to get a ticket from the fire marshal, so I moved it, locked the wheels into position, came back into the auditorium to do some final notes. Went backstage and sure enough there was the chair in front of the fire doors again. There was nobody in the theater that could have moved it, and so when I went to grab it to move it back into its original position again, as soon as I touched it, I got an icy chill that ran through my body. I think the building is definitely haunted. There's, some of our biggest crew members and stagehands refuse to go upstairs by themselves because it's too spooky up there.
The ghost of Franklin Johnson has come back. He's there quite often. Often on a dark night when people are there by themselves, late at night during rehearsals, his ghost is there. As you can imagine, people aren't expecting to see him. He scares the daylights out of them.
You've got a lot of elements here that are likely to produce a ghost story. You've got the ashes of the founder buried under the stage, and of course, ashes are associated with death. Death is associated with ghosts. So it's not a very long leap to imagine, if you're prone to believe in ghosts, that the ghost of the founder may inhabit this building. Secondly, you've got an acting community, and the world of theater is rife with superstition and fantasy. We all know about the Scottish play Macbeth, where there are all sorts of superstitions about what happens to actors who play the roles, etc., etc. But in general, actors and directors and so forth are more fantasy prone. That's their craft, to use their imaginations and present that to the audience, to be sensitive to their emotions and not question them, but to project them to the audience. So you've got a group of people who are much more likely to be prone to misinterpreting normal stimuli in terms of what their expectation is, that the ghost of the founder may be there. And then the ashes of the founder. What a good mixture to generate ghost stories.
I think Franklin Johnson could be one of the ghosts here, but I think there's a number of spirits here.
My first experience with the ghost that lives in the theater here was in 1989 during a show called Life with Father. It was set in the Victorian era. I noticed that when one of the actors made his exit and went upstairs, that a woman followed him. And then they checked upstairs and she wasn't up there. She just looked like another actor.
One of the apparitions there is a woman. We don't know exactly who she is. Probably somebody who had acted on the stage, or maybe somebody else just associated with the area. A woman wearing a beautiful Victorian gown. She herself was a very beautiful woman. She follows people around the theater, but nobody knows who she is or why she's there.
When you leave the stage after a performance and cross towards the lobby, the building is alive. It holds the energy of the people who've been through it. It's not intimidating in any way, but it certainly is a collector in this auditorium itself. It's a wonderful place. It's a very, very special place.
As long as there are actors on the stage at the White Rock Playhouse, perhaps Franklin Johnson and the lady in the long Victorian gown will be there watching, encouraging, and scaring the daylights out of them. Victoria has many haunted restaurants, and one of those is the 4 Mile House.
My name is Jill. I've been working at 4 Mile for a couple years now, and it was Halloween night, and this is one of the most eerie experiences I have. I'm almost reluctant to tell anyone about this, but it was very slow that night, and there was a Scotch bottle that was on the counter, and it just came up floating in midair past me and landed directly on the bar. And it was as if someone had picked it up and had gently put it there, but no one was there.
My name is Sue. I worked at the 4 Mile for about 5 years,
And I've encountered one experience, and that was about 4 years ago. I was training the boss's daughter, and I've taken 3 orders out here. And I was looking at this gentleman by himself, sitting at the table thinking, I gotta get to him, but I can't. It's just too many things going on. I said, Sam, could you please go to table 16? There's a single guy by himself, and I can't get to his order because I'm just too busy. She says, sure, I'll go out there. She went out there. She came back in, and she goes, and what table number was that again? And I said, table 16. She went back out there, and she came back in. She goes, and what did he look like? So I described this person, and she says, you just met Jake. I said, well, who is Jake? And she says, oh, he's the ghost of the 4 Mile.
The 4 Mile House is one of the most historic restaurants and pubs in Victoria. It's named the 4 Mile House because it's 4 miles from downtown Victoria. It was started in the 1850s by Peter Calvert and his wife Elizabeth. Elizabeth Calvert became well known in the area as a healer. Her Indian women friends would come and they would trade herbs. It was in about 1980 that the Hames, Graham and Wendy, bought the place. They soon discovered how haunted it was. The place was really quite a mess. It was a labor of love and sweat, according to Wendy. And one day, she was on her hands and knees, and she was almost 9 months pregnant as well. And she kept saying to herself as her back ached on this hot, hot day, this had better be worth it. She had gone over that spot so many times, so she was amazed that there was something still there on the floor. It was something that definitely wasn't there only seconds before. She leaned over and picked it up. It was a 5-cent piece from the United States, and the date was 1867. How it got there, she has no idea. But even though it was only 5 cents, she realized that this was an omen. It was going to be worth it after all. And so they persevered. When Wendy first came to the 4 Mile House, the gardens were in a complete mess. They hadn't been looked after for a long, long time. But at one time, they had been a showplace in the area. And so, without knowing anything at all about gardening, she started to work on them. She didn't really know what she was doing, but from the very beginning, she felt as though her hands were being guided by some unseen force. Perhaps the woman that she saw standing at the window on a number of occasions, the woman believed to be Elizabeth Calvert, the person who had first made the gardens the beautiful places they were. And later, the gardens did turn into a beautiful showplace again. And many people, since then, coming to the parking lot have seen a woman standing at a window, but when they look again, she's not there.
My name is Andrew. I work here at the 4 Mile House Pub. And I've heard some stories here. Sometimes the staff will be in the kitchen and we'll be just talking about stuff, and all of a sudden we'll just be hearing noises coming from the bar area, and we'll come outside and there's no one. Just completely empty, but there's noise. We heard noise going on. It's weird.
The room that is known as the tea room is a place that has at least several ghosts. And Wendy found one herself during the early days of the restaurant. She was doing some waitressing. It was before opening time, so as she passed the door of the tea room, she was quite surprised that there was somebody in there. It was a man, and he was sitting at one of the tables. Her first reaction was, who is that? And she went into the room to investigate. The man was gone. But the chair was ajar where he'd been sitting only a few seconds before. She realized that this was probably a ghost. Perplexed, she started talking to the chef. The chef had seen someone in there as well. The chef said, let me tell you what he looks like. And detail for detail, the chef was able to describe that man. He was apparently quite a well-known apparition there in the tea room.
One incident that happened to me, I had to change some things on a menu, so I decided to get some extra menus. And I went upstairs where the menus are stored. After I grabbed the menu, for some strange reason, this door swang open. And out comes this guy, which I found out later after doing a seance, that was Jake. And he just ran by me. I mean, literally, they just ran by, scared the bejeebus out of me. And that was my experience that I've experienced from there.
The other thing that happened that was completely strange was that I had two glasses together and I could not get them apart. I tried and I tried. So I put them down. I was gone for maybe a few seconds. I came back and there they were sitting on the bar counter about at least 5 inches apart. It was as if something had helped me out. It was really strange.
The employees that work here at the 4 Mile Pub, we decided to talk to Wendy about it, and she decided to have a seance.
Early on, they decided they would try an experiment. Wendy's family often had used a Ouija board, the homemade variety. They would put numbers and letters on pieces of paper and spread them around a table, a wine glass turned upside down, and then the wine glass does the moving, and that's exactly what happened at the 4 Mile House. They made contact with a number of spirits. One of them, he gave his name as Jake. Jake had worked at the 4 Mile House, probably as a stable boy, many, many years before. And Jake had met an untimely end. He had been murdered. However, the people that owned the place had some influence. They wanted to cover this up, and so Jake's murder never really was fully investigated. Through the Ouija board, a lot of information of a very positive nature can come forward.
Well, the seances are interesting social settings because you have a group of people all gathered together deliberately to suspend their disbelief and to try to come to have contact with some disembodied spirit. And so because that's the purpose of the whole thing, they're bent on interpreting any kind of, in quotes, information as coming from a ghost. And in some seances, people use wine glasses or Ouija boards or whatever in the hope that the ghost or the spirit will move them. And very often this involves some contact by the humans around the table. People can unconsciously move objects or move wine glasses, and if you have a number of letters arranged around the table, spell out things, being quite unaware they're deliberately doing this. And they attribute the movement to the ghost. And so all they end up getting when the words are spelled out is something they either already knew or something they've already fantasized and imagined. But because they're unaware of these movements that are being caused by they themselves, they become more convinced than ever that the ghost is real.
At the 4 Mile, there's this stained glass window of a lady wearing a beautiful white flowing dress, and she's the White Lady of April Point.
Apparently she was a woman staying in the 4 Mile House with the Calverts, and her husband was a sea captain. She would go out every day waiting for his ship to come in. And then she heard, of course, that he would never come home. He'd been lost at sea. Her ghost still returns to April Point, a small point of land jutting into Esquimalt Harbor very close to the 4 Mile House. She's seen there on dark winter evenings, a white shimmering form on April Point.
It's quite a sad story because this lady here over the last 100 years has been looking out to sea, waiting for her man to return home. I mean, she must have really loved him.
Wendy and Graham have come to realize that the spirits of the 4 Mile House are friendly. It's a place where people can dine and have a drink in the ambience of the 1850s and 1860s while enjoying the company of people who lived then and perhaps even earlier as well. The Princess Mary Restaurant Vessel on dry land became a very popular place through the 1950s and 1960s. The whole place is very haunted. Not unusual really, because ships can be very haunted places.
A waitress that used to work here, she was heading up to the storage room, which used to be the wheelhouse when this was a boat. And she was getting some stuff for the kitchen, and she looked up to the rafters and she saw a woman hanging there. And the woman opened her eyes and looked at her, and it totally freaked her out. So she looked away, and then when she looked back, the woman was gone. So she brushed it off, thinking her eyes were playing tricks on her. the exact same woman that she saw hanging there walked past her in the hallway. I believe it's haunted. There's several people that have died on the ship, and I don't think they're ready to go anywhere soon. I believe this is their home.
There seems to be something about one of the components of the old ship itself, perhaps the Venezuelan oil tanker. It's said that the wife of a former captain had committed suicide by hanging herself in the old wheelhouse.
Today, we boast that we have a resident ghost that comes around and does different things around the Princess Mary. Some of the examples are rattling dishes, footsteps when there's nobody there, and many different little things that go on, and we just take it for granted that there's a female ghost around and she's friendly, and we live with her on a day-to-day basis.
The Princess Mary is a favorite ship in Victoria. It was a coastal steamer built in Scotland. It arrived in Victoria just before World War I. A very well-known sight until the early 1950s when the ship needed lots of repairs. It was being scrapped at Capital Iron in downtown Victoria, and directly across the harbour, Harold Elworthy operated Island Tug and Barge. Elworthy needed a place for his staff in the growing business to have coffee in their lunch breaks, and he saw the saloon as being a pretty good place. And as time went on, their business expanded and they needed to add more. And so part of a wooden ferry was brought in and added to the old ship. And then a Venezuelan oil tanker became part of it as well.
A couple of the other things that have happened on the Princess Mary when it was in service was there was 2 sailors that had hung themselves also in 2 cabins, and 2 people had drowned that we have know of, and we have them documented.
Mr. Lang and I were working upstairs. It used to be the wheelhouse.
It was approximately 10:30 at night, and we were taking inventory, and we had locked up the rest of the ship, and there was nobody else in the building.
All of a sudden, I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. We both turned to each other and said, "Did you hear that?" And we both got up, walked outside, out the room, no one in sight. But I still, to this day, remember those footsteps.
Well, the Princess Mary restaurant story is an interesting one. Of course, you got all the elements here. Ships have often been associated with hauntings and ghost stories. And then the legend, of course, of the woman who hung herself. All these elements provide a good setting for ghost stories. Now, ghost stories often come about because people perceive things late at night, and they like to think that perhaps ghosts only come out after dark. But what happens is that after dark, we become much more anxious. We depend very much on visual stimulation for our sense of security in the world. And in the dark, we can't obviously have the same sense of security we have when the lights are on. So even in semi-darkness, we're much more likely to be a little bit anxious, a little bit more prone to anxiety, and certainly more prone to misinterpret stimuli, whether it's the creaking of pipes or whatever, as being something sinister, something that justifies the anxiety we're feeling. In the context of a place that's supposedly haunted, our brains quickly jump to, that's the ghost.
Adjacent to the new second-floor banquet room is an old area, part of the old Venezuelan oil tanker. It's used now for storage, and only staff have access to it. One of the servers for a club luncheon one day was walking through that storage room.
And as I walk up to the upper level, there was a man in the back. And I was in a hurry, so I didn't pay too much attention. And then I stopped him and said, "There was a man there. What is he doing out there?" Because it's a service area. Nobody goes there. So I turned back and I said, "Excuse me, can I help you?" And he was gone. I went back afterwards, double-checked. No one was in the room, and it's a mystery.
The kitchen seems to be a very haunted place as well. In fact, that's where most of the hauntings take place in the Princess Mary. At first, it was just small things. The staff began to notice the kitchen utensils suddenly going missing. They appear at the end of the day exactly as they were once located, but on the opposite side of the room. No one had done it, and if that happened just once or twice, It might be written off as a strange quirk, but it happens all the time. The lady who washes dishes, who's been there for a number of years, says that sometimes when she steps away just for a moment with the dishes piled up, she comes back and discovers that they're all done. And it happens very often.
Myself and another chap, Henry, were working in the kitchen. We had noticed that our dishwasher had left, so there was nobody else in the kitchen. It was just Henry and I. We seen an escargot dish fly off 10 to 12 feet against the convection oven on the other side. So even if it fell off the shelf, it would never get that momentum. So we both stood there in awe in the middle of this big rush, and we could not believe our eyes. We were heading out home, and we walked down into the large banquet room that we have at the Princess Mary. And I looked across to see a white streak run down through the original part of the ship, and then it disappeared. So needless to say, we were very upset and very scary at that event.
The most unusual experience, I would say, was on an afternoon, more busy than usual. I was serving quite a few tables, and I had a tray full of coffee on my plate. And as I was walking through the restaurant, one of the cups literally jumped up like there was a spring underneath it and spun through the air. It landed straight on the ground, right side up, without spilling a drop. There was nothing on me, nothing on my tray. The carpet was dry. It was unbelievable.
Have passengers from days gone by return to the old ship just for one last ride? Or is it the wife of the captain of the Venezuelan oil tanker, now an addition to the old restaurant vessel? There's so many things that make the ship haunted. And even the new parts seem to attract ghosts. I think the Princess Mary will be haunted for a very long time.
The Halifax Club has remained a landmark in Halifax for many years. It is the site of a private gentleman's club. It is where high society hangs its hat. And it also is a place that is reputed to be haunted.
The club was established in 1862 by 15 influential and wealthy men in Halifax. The men had very close ties with Mother England. The city needed a grand ballroom and a place to hold special dinners. They decided to form the club, build the clubhouse. The first story involves the manager of the club. The first manager was here at the Halifax Club in 1864. And in 1870, he shocked everyone by standing up in front of the members, stabbing himself repeatedly. The reason why we think this is a potential for haunting, obviously there was a level of insanity, and this is one of the only recorded deaths here at the club.
The untimely death of the general manager at his own hands has resulted in his spirit remaining at the scene of his death. He is now a prisoner of the famous Halifax Club. One hot spot of activity in the club is near the cloakroom on the first floor of the building. One employee actually experienced an ice-cold feeling standing near the cloakroom and sensed a really evil presence near her. It was a spine-tingling encounter. Although this employee still works at the club, she's not at all comfortable going near the cloakroom area on the first floor of the building.
The second story involves one of our members being involved with the most popular lady of the evening here in Halifax.
One night, a member of the club went into Halifax for some entertainment. He joined the company of another woman. possibly a lady of the night. Unfortunately for this gentleman, he died while he was in bed with his company.
He had a heart attack while with her, and he was married. She wanted to avoid scandal, so she contacted the club.
His companions and members of the club wanted to save his poor reputation. Thereby, they went and retrieved the body and brought the body back and laid it out on the front steps of the club. They wanted it to make it seem like the poor chap had died while walking out the front door. And since that time, this gentleman, who seems to be quite misplaced in history, remains haunting the Gentlemen's Club.
So the Halifax Club haunting, I suppose, has all the elements of the usual ghost story. You have a prestigious old building, and perhaps the people in this particular club want to have a ghost. You know, a lot of the old British clubs had ghosts, and perhaps there's a deliberate effort to create a legend of a ghost. I don't know. But the history of this particular ghost, the man dragged to the front steps after he had died in the company of a prostitute, is a rather vague one. Did that actually happen or not? Was that made up to support the ghost story? Is the ghost really kind of a club mascot? Did it start out as a hoax that later on came to be believed by generations of members? It's hard to say. But what you have here, very vague story to back up the notion that there should be a ghost there, and then, of course, all the possibility in the world to have people imagine a ghost once they've learned the story.
There are 7 rooms at the Halifax Club, all named after predominant or founding members of the club. 3 behind me, the Kenny, Tobin, and Kennard, were named after founding members.
The Halifax Club had quite a famous member at one time. His name was Kennard. Kennard owned shipping lines in Halifax, and in fact it was Kennard's company who built the infamous Titanic. Near the Halifax Club is actually the site or cemetery of the victims of that disaster. It's quite possible the activity in the cemetery is a result of these poor souls that are actually wanting to go home. And no doubt these victims, on occasion, might be going looking for the man responsible for building that ship. And what better place to look for him than the Halifax Club?
Some of the haunting type scenarios that have happened here at the club have involved chandeliers swinging.
One waitress in particular heard one day the sound of glasses banging together, and when she looked around to see what was going on, she realized that the sound of glass was actually the chandelier above her swinging back and forth on its own. Now, this has occurred many times in the dining rooms, and on one particular occasion, not one chandelier, but many chandeliers were swinging back and forth at the same time. Obviously, the general manager never left the dining room.
There has been a staff member who's come to me and said, I get this eerie chill over my body when locking up.
Waiters and waitresses working in the club have also reported hearing whispers and sensing someone right beside them. And yet when they turn around, no one is there, and there was no one there to call their name. We do know that we possibly may have 2 spirits haunting the Halifax Club. It could be the gentleman member or the general manager. But whoever it is, we do know that they have taken out an eternal membership in the Halifax Club. The historic Bytown Museum stands as a monument to the workers who constructed the Rideau Canal. Workers were pushed to work extremely hard, long hours, and their health was not necessarily important to the supervisors of the canal. They had a timeline, and that's what they followed. death did not stop the construction of the Rideau Canal. The exhibits displaying the harsh conditions the workers experienced while building the canal may be one reason that attracts the spirits to the building. Today, stories are told of an array of paranormal activity happening in the building. For example, lights turn off and on, objects are moved, and people report seeing or feeling a presence in the building.
I've been working as the museum director for four years. You cannot work in this building without having some paranormal experiences. One of the strangest events, because when I first started working here, I was a bit of a skeptic. And Hélène, who works here, said that the playing cards in one of our displays, the parlor display, in the by parlor, she said they would move. And I said, yes, I'm sure it's the visitors. So finally, this went on for a while, and she said, all right, when we leave, before we leave tonight, you place the cards in any way that you want. And since the two of us drove to work together, we knew that nobody else would be in the building. And there are no breezes that can move cards. The building is sealed because we are a museum. So the very next morning, I came upstairs first, and the playing cards were on the floor. They weren't only rearranged on the table, they were on the floor to sort of make a point. And that's sort of when I started to think, okay, there's something to the spirit thing.
Duncan McNabb is believed to be one of the spirits inhabiting the museum. McNabb was a supervisor of the Rideau Canal and worked out of this building. Current employees of the museum admit that if Duncan's name is mentioned, the lights may flicker or the computers in the building go amok.
On one of the main computers in the gift shop, occasionally when the name Duncan McNabb is mentioned, it has been known that this computer would turn off and then reboot itself and turn back on. Last summer when I was here in the gift shop, I was speaking to one of the staff here at the museum. When I mentioned the name Duncan McNabb, the computer did shut down and rebooted, but this time, instead of just restarting itself, it started to print out text on the screen. Again and again, it printed the words, Lieutenant Colonel John By, Lieutenant Colonel John By. Some of the staff here have guessed that the reason the computer printed those words is that it was a message from the spirit trying to tell us, perhaps, that we had the person wrong, perhaps that it wasn't Duncan McNabb, but that it was Colonel By, or that perhaps there's more than one ghost here at the museum.
One of the major areas of activity in the building is the gift shop. People report objects being moved on their own, doors refuse to be open, and lights often flicker on their own.
My name is Alan. I've worked here at the Bytown Museum for about 3 years, and in that time I've seen and I've heard some strange things. I work in the gift shop, and one of the responsibilities is to arrange the display cases, and I'd arranged some ceramic bears just prior to me leaving that evening. When I came in and opened up the shop at 7 o'clock the following morning, I noticed that 2 of the bears from the display case were on the floor. I picked them up and went back to the display case, then noticing that the other bears in the case had been turned upside down, but the case was locked. There was no way that could have happened. I then realized that I had to turn the alarm off. So I rushed over to the control panel, but when I reached to turn off the alarm, something shoved me hard against the wall. I reached around, I ran over and turned on the lights, but there was nothing there. I can't explain it. I don't know what happened, but it scared me pretty fierce.
Perhaps the most convincing encounter to happen here at the museum happened a couple of falls ago to myself and some of my staff. We were having a staff party here at the museum. We decided to watch some movies and spend the night, I guess, telling some tales and spooking each other out. And afterwards, we decided to go downstairs to close up. We went down to the first floor to the gift shop, and before we left, I had to set the alarms and the motion detectors. When all of a sudden the door started to vibrate, a little at first, and then it shook violently and very heavily as though somebody on the other side were pushing the door and banging on it, trying to get out. I was absolutely terrified. I was paralyzed with fear. I couldn't move. When we later got outside, I asked them what they'd seen, and in fact, they had not seen the door shaking at all. They had heard were a set of heavy footsteps crossing the floor above them, walking along right towards the spot where they were standing. All of us were quite convinced by this experience, and ever since then we felt that it's one of the more haunted buildings here in Ottawa.
One unusual exhibit that draws a lot of attention, not only from employees but also visitors to the museum, is the cast hand of Thomas D'Arcy McGee, one of the Fathers of Confederation. D'Arcy McGee was shot down in cold blood by Patrick Wayland one evening in Ottawa. Since McGee was shot in the face, instead of making a cast of his facial features, the officials decided to make a cast of his hand. One time, a staff employee found that the case had been removed covering the cast hand. It was seated beside the stand. The employee went to handle the cast hand of D'Arcy McGee and couldn't believe how ice cold it felt. She was shocked. The Bytown Museum is a good example of spirit imprinting, and that is the energy that is surrounded by the objects. When an object or a possession of a person is placed on exhibit after they die, there's a good possibility that they may be connected to that object. So, Bytown Museum, like many other museums throughout the country, all experience a similar activity around artifacts.
So when we see old objects or artifacts or in old buildings, we tend to be filled with some sense of awe. Wouldn't attract any attention at all in Europe, where it would be almost like yesterday to say something was built 300 years ago. We feel this awe, and we have two directions in which we can go. We can use that awe as a springboard to explore the history of the objects or the building, to find out what they really represent, what the true story is behind them, and learn a great deal about the culture that produced them. Or we can simply focus in on something that is sort of like mental candy, mental popcorn, the ghost stories, the hauntings, the sensational aspect of it that in all likelihood isn't true to begin with. And even if it were true, it's so minor and so inconsequential that for it to divert us from a study of the larger history of these objects, that's kind of sad. There's no evidence that there are ghosts. There's no evidence that objects are associated to disembodied spirits. But there's lots of evidence, we take this as a given, that objects, carvings, and so forth were made by real people sometime in the past, and they can guide us to not only understanding those people at that time, but also help inform us about people in general, and perhaps we'll learn something about ourselves.
People say, "Are you afraid working in this building?" And I recall something my father told me when I was very, very young, that we had no reason to fear the dead, that they would never hurt you, that it was the living that would get you every time. And working in this building, those words have often come back to me.